Thank you, everyone, for your participation and engagement this morning. It's so, again, great to just hear voices and conversations committed to the work we do. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker, and that we want to welcome Dr. Melissa Marie Usiak, who's an associate professor and the director of K-12 Education Administration at Michigan State, and soon to be, as well, the assistant superintendent of early learning at Livingston ESA. She's a veteran educator, having served for 2 decades as a teacher, leadership coach, assistant principal, and principal in 3 distinctly different public school districts in Michigan. Dr. Usiak has been a role model and mentor for aspiring school leaders throughout her career. As a principal, Dr. Usiak invested much of her time and energy building systems to better support students living in poverty, an experience that informs how she approaches school leadership, preparation, and the urgency for greater social justice in education. Particularly noteworthy is Melissa's work on developing the leadership agency of teachers and staff as a means of supporting and sustaining continuous improvement. Since becoming an MSU Professor of Practice in 2015, she has taught graduate students in the Master's in Educational Doctorate programs at Michigan State. Her passion for leading and learning is infectious and inspires students and colleagues alike. She has been an instrumental part of our work on the task force, as well as creating the organizational practices with the organizational practices team, Dr. Christy Cooper-Stein and Dr. Allison Resnick. And we're just so glad that she's with us and will remain in her role, both at Michigan State and soon to be at Livingston ESA, so she'll be part of our MESA team continuously. Welcome, Dr. Melissa Marie Usiak.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I want to give some gratitude before I begin, and that goes to MAISA-GELN. Just what a lovely event that they've poured themselves into planning and coordinating. And so from the responsiveness that Rusty showed you this morning with temperature and water and chocolate, I really want to thank them. It's been a lovely day and a half, and hope to continue that trajectory. But I also want to thank you. I mean, you have sacrificed something to be here, whether that was time with family last night. That's not that it's not nice to have a nice stay in a hotel by yourself. So maybe, I'm not sure if that was a sacrifice. Or just not being in your space, not answering your emails till tonight. And I just want you just to turn to one another and say, I'm so glad you're here. Excellent. We noticed yesterday, we know you were really glad that you're here. We noticed yesterday that no one had their laptops out in our breakout session for Kaylani and I. And then we were like, gosh, no one had their computers out during the morning session with Allison either. You guys are really engaged, and we really appreciate it. And so, again, just appreciation for you being here and your leadership. Before we start, and I have slides, of course, so I don't get on too many bird walks. Just a few things just to set us up for success. One is that, this work is a labor of love. I feel like Allison, Christy, and I are sharing a second child with you with the updated version. The first was birthed, 5 or 6 years ago. With the first version, Christy and I co-parented really well. We invited Allison into our space. And so, it is that much work, but it is a labor of love. And it is an intersection of so many of my passions around leadership, around leaders understanding the teaching and learning, so instructional leadership, about building agency of others. And so it's just been a real it's been a passion project for myself. So I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm so glad. It's been great. It means I'm really old, and I've been around long enough to know you, a lot of you. But so I just wanted to mention that because I've seen you before, I might tell a few repeated stories, and I'm unapologetic about that because the framing for this morning is all around how we set up the school-wide essentials. And so a little background on that is when Christy and I were invited into the project, we sat around with practitioners represented from across the state, the Early Literacy Task Force, and we talked about what organizational practices need to be in place in order to create the conducive conditions for those classroom practices to thrive and flourish. So we threw out a bunch of practices, and then Christy and I, our role was to go and find the research that matched that practice. And if there wasn't research that matched that practice, it didn't make the cut. And that was a little different than starting with Nell and Claire and our researchers, even at Early Math, where we really started with the research and then built the practice out. So today I'm going to try to channel that process and really share what are the practices, and then I'm going to show you how you can use the research as your on-ramp. So yesterday, the on-ramp to these essentials with Allison was the values and the traps. And so we're going to talk about those values and traps again today. But I might repeat a few stories about my time as a principal. And again, I'm unapologetic because it is a fiber of who I am and how I lead. And so they are ingrained and they are imprinted on my heart and in my leadership. So unapologetic about that. But I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. The other things you need to know is I define leadership broadly. So when I say you're a leader, I don't care about title. I don't care about role. I don't care about status. Everyone has an opportunity to be a leader, including you, and I'm hoping that you'll take that back to your organizations as well. How can we get more people involved in leadership? Another thing that I want you to know is that although I was not always graceful and patient, as Rusty set us up for yesterday in my leadership, I often got pretty excited and the sense of urgency started to take over. I had some mentors that would pull me back to reality and say, you're going to outrun your coverage. You got to slow down. So I did, but that was a hard lesson for me. So when we talk about the fact that this takes time, it's painful to be patient, but it's so important, and I learned that. So that was a hard lesson for me. So the traps thing, that's not a big issue for me because I tend to live in a creative insubordination stage at all times. It's not what they called me at the district level as a building principal. I learned it after I left, and then I was super excited to know that there was a more fitting label than what they had said. So I'm going to ask you to think about, to contrast those traps, how can you be that creative insubordination spirit when you leave here? What can you bend? What can you massage? What can you influence? What can you nudge on? Really, really important as you go back, because those traps, they are really nestled in our habits, and it's hard to break habits. That's why they're called habits. So think about being a creatively insubordinate leader when you go back, because you're going to hear me speak to some of that this morning. And then the other thing is that I really leveraged 1 and 4. Practices 1 and 4 when I was a principal were the foundation for 5 and 6, for changing our systems around supporting students. We leaned in hard. Now, part of that was because I had a passion for leading adult learning. So I went in with a lot of skill sets that Allison told you about. I knew how to structure professional learning, how to design it. But I also, because I think about leadership broadly, I wasn't the only one doing it. So my leadership team was integral in all of that. So as I talk about 5 and 6, please know that we leveraged 1 and 4. So just like Laurel said, they are so interconnected, so interconnected, and that's a good thing. You work on one, you start to see improvements in the other, and that's systems level work. That's why we created these, right? It's different than the classroom practices that are really specific, and of course create a comprehensive, basis for leading our students in their learning, but these are definitely connected and wedded together. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story. I am a solo storyteller today, but please know that this is a collective story, and it is a story. If you want to bring up the slides, that would be great. Thank you. It's a story. It's not your story. It's not the story. I have a story to share about my school when I was a principal. My lovely mentor, colleague, and friend, Sean LaRosa, as I'm starting to work with her in this transition time, she often will pose to the teams that she leads IRL, in real life. How does this play out in real life? So I'm borrowing that from her and thank her for sharing that with me. And she said yesterday, one of her values is we're never fully baked. And that's so true, right? Just like someone mentioned this morning, Rusty and Susan mentioned, we still have learning to do. So, all right, so this is a story, but very much a collective story. I'm just the only one here. I also want you to notice I'm sporting my old vintage Sycamore Stars t-shirt. So as we talk about creating culture, in order to manifest these practices, culture was really important. So having a common t-shirt and a theme you can wrap yourself around that ties with your values, really easy way to start to get people on your train. All right, let's get going. So I hate headshots, so now I'm just never going to use them and just include pictures with my grandchild. So that's my grandson, and he's adorable. And before I had him, I did this work with students in mind, but I also did this work with my own children in mind, and now I have him to add to the mix. I want you to read this quote to yourself as I read it aloud. We are the wizards. You are the wizards. We benefit from those who have put evidence-based practices in our hands. It is up to us to never doubt that we can figure out how to make it work in our system. We have to dig deep, lean on each other, and maintain a focus on what matters. We've got this. I want you to repeat that with me. We've got this. Now, I also want you to look at the three wizards. And I want you to recall a time you walked into a space, a classroom, a leadership meeting, and you had one of those looks on your face. I know you have, because I have. So although you are wizards and we've got this, you don't have to rely on magic. You don't have to have a magic wand. We're providing you all the wizardry you need in these couple of days. You got to go back and practice it, but we're giving you what you need. We didn't have this when I was a principal. We had to scrape together. We didn't have a set of practices. We didn't have a set of footnotes with research all harvested for us. We had to go find it. And so we had to do things like find this. We called this the Green Book because it had a really long title and we didn't want to always say it. So the Green Book's from 2007. It's old. It's called Annual Growth for All Students, Catch-up Growth for Those Who Are Behind. I had so many kids behind. So this is a story. Once upon a time, there was a school named Sycamore Elementary. I was a new leader. I didn't know what I was doing. Everyone dropped their nuggets of this is what we need to do different. You never hear the good stuff when you're a new leader. They just come into your office and tell you all the crap that's been happening for the last decade, and you get to fix it, starting from the parking lot. I had so many nightmares about the parking lot my first summer because I was like, oh my God, I don't know what drop-off's like, but they're all telling me I need to change it. Okay, so once upon a time there was a school, and this school had the most beautiful, vibrant, dynamic children, staff, parents, community you could ever imagine. So a little bit about 2007 when I entered this school. We had about 410 students, pre-K to 4, 3 sections of each grade level. we had 2 self-contained classrooms. We had actually 4 self-contained classrooms, 2 early childhood classrooms for 3 and 4-year-olds, a self-contained classroom for students with cognitive impairments, kindergarten to 2nd grade, and a self-contained classroom for students with cognitive impairments, 3rd and 4th grade. That's important to the story because it folds in when we talk about our values and we talk about where I found leverage to do this work. Staff, a lot of veteran staff. Over the course of 7 years, a lot of those staff left. I brought on about 50%, 60% of new staff, which is always a gift, but that takes time, right? I was patient while we did that. So you have what you have, right? So the story starts in 2007, which was the 3rd year of a phase-in of redistricting in this particular school district. So what they found is that there was a lot of generational and situational poverty. It was situated in one particular school, Aaron North's former school, who used to be a principal in our district right after I was a principal. Well, what this did is it basically just lifted those students and just moved them over to Sycamore, right? So when I got there, the staff of teachers who were used to working with students with cognitive impairments and were very inclusive of those students, they were like deer in the headlights because all of a sudden they went from maybe 3 or 4, 5 children who were living in impoverished conditions to 20 or 22. We busted from 35% of students qualifying for free and reduced lunch to 70. Okay? And the staff did not know what to do. They were at a loss. They just didn't know. And it came from fear. It came from a not feeling competent, a lack of efficacy. I knew enough to know that. I let them rumble with it for a few months because that's what I was trying to humanize, right? This experience for the kids. I was trying to humanize this experience for the families and humanize the experience for the staff, importantly as well. So that's where the journey begins. What we were finding is that a lot of students with cognitive impairments, because of living in poverty, if you know the brain research, there are conditions of living in poverty that will create a lot of gray matter in the brain. Now, we know based on brain research that is malleable, right? There's epigenetics, there's neuroplasticity, right? We didn't know that at the time, right? We thought it was more fixed. And so we needed to go on this journey. I needed to lead with my leadership team this journey, leverage 1 and 4, right? In order for my staff to feel more competent in serving these students. We had students, this was our services. We had special ed resource room teacher. We had our self-contained classrooms. We had 1 Title I para, and we had 1 reading recovery teacher. Special ed, Title I para, reading recovery. Special ed, lots of gates to get through, right? Title I para, likely not highly qualified, highly trained, I should say. Qualified to be a para, not highly trained as a classroom teacher. Reading recovery, 1 grade level, right? 1 grade level. What we were finding is that our situation was not like the situation of the school down the street. Our students that qualified, the students that were qualifying for reading recovery down the street with a higher SES would never see reading recovery in my school. So when we talk about allocating resources, right, I was being creatively insubordinate with how the district should reallocate the resources. Took a while. People started to pair it, and we made those changes. So those were the systems of support. So what was I in the old model of qualifying a child for special ed? We'd send in the school psychologist, send in the social worker, sit at the, the data review to qualify, DNQ, do not qualify. Do not qualify, do not qualify, do not qualify, do not qualify, do not qualify. It was on repeat. And I didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. So many kids needed more support. So we went on this journey to figure out how at tier 1, we were going to change what we were doing. We were going to shift what we were doing with our students. So here's the prologue. I used culture building as a chance to get into that space to build trust and relationships with my staff. That's one of my values, trust and relationships. So we revalued, remissioned, and revisioned the first half of the year. And everybody took part. Paraeducators, recess supervisors, the secretary, the custodian, everyone. And when I say paraeducator, we had an army with 4 self-contained classrooms and a large ASD population. We had an army of paraeducators. They were folded into the process. They were part of our team. So we revalued. Just like we've been talking about the values, those values became now part of the why. And I I milked those values, right? Oh, you said you want this? All right, put your money where your mouth is. Let's go, right? So we took a look at our core values. We remissioned, right? We had a very collaborative process of missioning. Again, as I've said in lots of other presentations, it's the process, not the product. Mission is great. Statements are great. It was the process we went through, anchored in our core values. That was the part that really moved us. And then we revisioned. I remember I took a team to a training, and we were talking about vision, and they said, draw your vision. Draw your vision of what you want your school to be. And my leadership team drew a bird sanctuary. And that was their metaphor for we want students to get what they need no matter where they are. They can flit over to this bird bath. They can flit over here to this bird feeder. They can nest up here in this tree. We want no boundaries for our students. We just want them to get what they need. Oh, I leveraged that quite a bit. But the leadership team did that. And so we started with this the first half of the year. I went to spring break to see my sister in California who had just had a baby. I took a whole suitcase of books, right? Because that's what I do. I'm a nerd and like that. And took a whole suitcase of books. And the first thing I dug into was the work of Ruby Payne, right? We've made lots of advancements in what we know about people living in poverty, that we eventually moved on to the work of Eric Jensen, teaching with poverty in mind. But that's where we started, with how do we do things differently to serve this population of students? What are our roles? And we talked a lot about that yesterday as well. So again, think about values, think about traps, think about being creatively insubordinate as we go through this story. Here are those values from our school-wide, center-wide document. I highlighted in these values some of the common values we chose at my school, at our school. So just to know that we weren't too far off. Again, we didn't have this beautiful guide. We didn't have the beautiful research that we've harvested for you. But we settled on some really similar values as well. So keep these in mind as I go through some of the practices. I also just want to make a quick connection to, this work is integrated across systems. One of those should also be your continuous improvement process and the use of the WISC model to drive that, right? The focus on the whole child. This is really the why of our work, right? Every individual child. So I just wanted to mention that this can be a grounding framework for you and model for you as well. All right, so chapter 1, let's talk about school-wide essential number 5, literacy and mathematics supports, and a system to allocate resources. In addition, not supplement, in addition to high-quality instruction. So it wasn't just our students in need, it was our core instruction because we had so many students in need, right? We needed to change what we did at Tier 1 all the way up through our system. I have active audience engagement, so I'm going to call on my wizards. Each time we move to a new bullet, they're going to read it. Sometimes we can pair what we're seeing with what we're hearing, and that makes it more effective. So I'm going to turn it over to my wizards in the back.
Instruction and additional supports are implemented across learning environments in addition to, not instead of, core instruction and are coherent and consistent with the essential instructional practices for literacy and mathematics.
So remember, I'm here to show you how to operationalize, right? I'm going to end each chapter with a little bit of research because that might be your hook. That might be your why, coupled with your values back in your space. But I'm going to talk about how do you operationalize that in a real school. Here's what we did. We did a time analysis. We didn't have the research you have, but we had the little green book, and they did a time analysis. How are we spending our time? How much time are we spending on literacy, on math, on small groups, on one-on-one? So we did time analysis. We decided on a non-negotiable. We will not pull students for additional instruction during literacy and mathematics. Non-negotiable. Now, I'm sorry, it has to be fit in at certain other times. We tried to get really creative. Would some kids miss a science or a social studies lesson? Unfortunately, yes, they would. And that's not something we promote on the task forces, but this is where we started, non-negotiable. No pulling out during math, no pulling out during ELA. Guess what? You had to have a common schedule across your grade levels in order to accommodate this. Because interventionists were pulling, special ed were pulling students, from different classrooms. They weren't all nestled. So we had to have time analysis, non-negotiables. Monthly grade level meetings, classroom teachers, special educators, and interventionists. Monthly meetings where we were talking about what's happening in core instruction, how is that playing out in intervention. We also instituted weekly communication between the interventionists, whoever that was, special ed or general ed, with the classroom teacher, weekly communication. We created a protocol. It was quick. It usually fit a group. You could send it off for 5 or 6 kids, but we built that time into the interventionist schedule so they had time to do that. Really important to stay connected. And then we also made a commitment to ensuring that even if our students were below grade level, they had exposure to grade level texts. We had too many teachers saying, well, they aren't going to understand, they don't read at that level. I'm going to drop it down and pick something different from the book room. And we were like, no. We knew enough to know that those children at least needed exposure to those grade level texts. It was a place to start, right, to ensure that they were having exposure at tier 1.
Supports are differentiated to the individual child's specific profile of strengths and needs.
Thank you, Wizard. Student study team and IEPCs, we changed the protocols. We started with the child's strengths. Sounds like a small tweak, right? But quickly could become a trap because it's the way we've always done it. The itsy bitsy box at the end of page 7 is for the child's strengths, right? Or the family input. So again, we flipped the script. We focused on what we wanted to. We moved that to the top. Sounds simple, but you started every conversation about an individual child with their strengths and their assets. Really important to those values that we've been talking about. We had individual goal setting for every child. Every child had an individual goal, got a protocol, literacy goal, math goal, shared those at conferences with families. We moved conferences to the 4th week of school. We weren't waiting 8 weeks to talk to a family. We were seeing the family, gave teachers enough time to get to know the child, do some assessing, set those goals. We shared those goals with family. There was even a part at the bottom with how can families possibly support this goal at home, right? So a connection with families as well. So that's how we started to differentiate to the individual child's profile, their strengths and their needs.
Highly trained educators are those teaching the children needing the most support.
That first bullet, y'all, one of the hardest moments of my career. This person still does not talk to me. She was the Title I paraeducator, and when I started to go to classroom teachers and I said, how is so-and-so doing? How is so-and-so doing? The classroom, in some cases, the classroom teacher was like, oh, well, I'm not sure, that's Jane's kid. Or that's Betty's kid. And I was like, stop the brakes. This is everyone's child. What are you talking about? So to break that cycle of not always having a highly trained educator working with the most at-risk students, I had to move her. I had to move her to special ed as a para. She eventually moved out of my building, right? Really hard conversations, hard nudges when you're trying to recreate systems. I reassigned staff. I took a teacher that wasn't as competent as an early childhood educator in K1, moved them to upper, coached them up, much better fit. I had to make a compassionate bus stop for some folks, right? What you have to offer is not meeting what our students need. I've given you lots of support. I've coached you. You've gotten the resources. This is where we're back to that conversation, right? But every once in a while, you have to make a compassionate bus stop. And then we also, one of the things, and again, I'm giving you a sprinkling of what we did, right? This is years of work. Another thing we did is we had our speech and language therapist did small groups in every kindergarten classroom, right? So when we talk about that weddedness between language and literacy, she was in there working with it was a tier 1. That was a tier 1 practice that we instituted. Highly trained educators working with the children that have the most needs. Hard conversations, hard decisions, be creatively insubordinate, right? Match it to your values, don't get in the trap, do it.
Teachers are supported to design needs-based instruction by using and analyzing multiple, varied, systemic, formative assessments and observation as appropriate in an ongoing basis to identify individual child needs early and accurately, tailor whole group, small group, and one-on-one instruction, measure progress regularly, and move students fluidly among layered supports as their needs change in order to avoid ability grouping that is long-term and static in nature.
Woo, there's a whole lot in that. Talk about wordsmithing. Allison, Christy, and I think had one individual meeting just on this particular bullet and sub-bullets. There's a lot going on in there. But we've got to use our data to help us be informed about our decisions. We started with kindergarten screening. By the time our students came in to start kindergarten, they had been in our school or had interaction with a kindergarten teacher 4 times, right? We had a kindergarten assessment screening day. We worked with the parents. They worked with a group of children. We had a cadre, right, a SWAT team in there, checking it out, making notes, deciding on how we were going to start from day 1, supporting children. This has evolved. This has evolved as a practice into a slow start where they actually take a couple weeks to reconfigure classrooms. It's very well communicated to staff or to families that there might be changes to balance out classrooms to ensure kids get what they support. But we had kindergarten screening before school started, so we could start on that. Flexible small groups by need, those monthly meetings, what we did is we looked at data and we reconfigured students. We had flooding. So a lot of you call it what I need, right? Win time. You might have another name for it. We called it flooding because we were flooding the grade level with whoever we could, right? And the highly trained educator worked with the most at-risk kids during that time. We regrouped kids. We flooded with paraeducators, interventionists, special education participated, classroom grade level teachers. Everybody was on board for that 30 minutes every day. Well, we piloted it, right? I said, try this for me. Let's do 2 days a week. By the end of the first year, they were like, we want it every day. Well, we had early release Wednesdays for PL, so we settled on 4 days a week. So 4 days a week for 30 minutes, every child got an extra dose of academics in groups according to what they needed, but they weren't static groups that started in September and ended in May, right? Every month, and even in between, because now all the kids were all of everybody's responsibility. It could happen in between the months as well. But the months kept us on track, allowed us to do this flexible grouping and not become static.
Formal and informal assessment practices disrupt historical patterns of marginalization with respect to race, ethnicity, gender, ability, socioeconomic status, language, etc.
We did a lot around assessment that met our needs but gave us good information. We suffer in our context to be DRIP, data rich, information poor. We decided we were going to take that back, scale it. We were going to make sure that we did the things that we needed to move kids along in the areas that they were needing. So we created our own balanced assessment system where we benchmarked our students 3 times a year, right? Pretty common practice for y'all. We progress monitored every other week for some Tier 2 students, some Tier 3 students, every week for some Tier 3, some Tier 2. We decided that. We decided what assessments. And then we did the diagnostic assessments with the students that we really needed to dig in deeply. Right? When I first got there, we were doing DRA with every child 3 times a year. Talk about a loss of instruction time. Good information. We wanted to promote that the classroom teacher had that level of deep understanding of a child, but we didn't mandate it was every child 3 times a year anymore. We massaged and made those decisions on an individual basis. We had data days. We instituted data days. A lot of you have data days, right? That's great. We matched a protocol, right, that met our needs. We brought everyone in, just like those grade level meetings with special ed, interventionists, classroom teachers. What we did is we showed all the grade level data to all the grade levels. So when you walked in for a data day, you saw the scope, the landscape of the whole school. So when I said, I'm sorry, I need to pull that support from your grade level because early intervention's where it's at, and this is what our K and 1 data looks like, I want you to collectively own that decision, right? So we had a real collective ownership across the school. We even took our data displays to our PTO meetings. So our PTO was aware of where our needs were. So when they wanted to do something and they wanted to support, they gave them ideas on what they might be able to do. We triangulated the data. Please do not come to our data meeting with one piece of data. That does not cut it for us. So we had to triangulate our data. And we had protocols and we supported each other in plugging that data in. So when you came, you had 3 pieces of data for every child. Here's a story about our Ames Web screener passage, right? This was new to us. Ames Web was just coming out when I was a principal. Second fluency passage, 1st grade winter benchmark. It was about the sea and the ocean, and it had the word yacht in it. How many children living in poverty have been on a yacht? How many of my children have been to the beach? I knew not very many because I wanted to know my students, and I did focus groups with them, and I found out what their extracurriculars were, what their vacations were, how they spent their time out of school. Not a lot had been to the beach. You don't think that those kids took a huge dive in their fluency when they read that passage in 1st grade? Absolutely. Culturally responsive assessment. Pay attention to what you're using. Is it oppressing kids further? Are you thinking about that? Okay, here's my turn. So I went from in real life to in real research. Get it? That was tricky, yeah. Okay, so we're not going to get into this one. We're not going to get into this one. So this comes from an empirically peer-reviewed journal, the British Educational Research Journal. What I want to encourage you to do is, I've just shared with you a bunch of practice. How does it play out? How does it operationalize in a school context? But I also want to pair it with what we know about the research. Don't be afraid to read research with your folks. So your values, your traps, and the research. Maybe that's where your why is foundational, is in the research. So I just want to mention that you can go to any of the footnotes, start digging into those if you need that concrete why hooked to research for your teams. We're not going to get into this one. Instead, I'm also going to I'm going to share with you, this is a practitioner journal. Educational Leadership from ASCD is a practitioner journal. But it's a great practitioner journal that solicits research. This is a more digestible piece in the folder or in the resources. I have this link. It's like a PDF of I wanted to print it on a computer and save it as a PDF. It's a lot of pages. It's not really that long. But this is a piece that you can get into if you're thinking about the synthesis of the research around ability grouping. If you know ability grouping is a trap in your organization, bust it out, right? Don't do it alone. Use your organizational practices. Use this research quickly. We know that this is a common practice in our schools, right? We know it's a trap. It's what we've always done. Historically and institutionally, we've done it to differentiate. Honorable goal on our part. Tracking typically happens more at the secondary level. It's a programmatic sort of division to separate students, usually by subject. Ability grouping usually is a division of students within a classroom, right? Can be multiple subjects that you might ability group. What this article synthesizes, what that British journal synthesizes, is that they don't increase ability grouping and tracking, do not increase overall student achievement, but they do promote inequality. So you may be doing no harm, because it's kind of like a wash as far as the academics, but it promotes inequality. And we don't want to do that. That's not hooked to our values. What they found in the synthesis of the research is that grouping and productivity, little evidence to support that claim that tracking has a higher overall achievement for heterogeneous groups. But grouping and inequality, no average difference between the grouped and ungrouped, but the low group did worse. That's where your inequality starts to pop up, right? So students in remedial classes perform poorly compared to ungrouped students. So think about that. Is the grouping by ability, static ability grouping, is that worth it when you know it's promoting the inequality? So high track students, they were gaining. Low track students were falling further behind. Why? In this synthesis of research out of the Ed Leadership article, really digestible piece, they say it was due to unequal instruction. So the pace and rigor had something to do with that. Unequal behavior and attitudes among students. I was just at a middle level conference this summer. Students know. They know when they're pulled, they know what rooms they have to go to, and even if nobody else notices, they know. So what can be done? Well, we can reduce, this is your trap, this is where you're going to be creatively insubordinate. We can reduce the use of tracking and grouping, which happens more at the secondary, but you're representing, the whole system, pre-K to 12. But we can also improve the use of ability grouping. We can reassess students on their capabilities and make adjustments regularly. We can provide access to grade level curricular materials and instruction. Remember I said are non-negotiable, don't pull students out of core instruction, make sure every child has exposure to grade level material as part of their tier 1, even if they're below grade level. And then my plea is also, if you're going to continue to group students, we know small groups is powerful, just make sure you're doing it flexibly. Make sure, again, these are systems. Your assessment systems are paired with your decision making, and it's done often so that you can group flexibly. So I wanted to show you one of your hooks might be the research. Don't be afraid to get into the research with your folks.
I have enlisted the help of one of Abbott Elementary's finest. Now, come on. Show us what you got.
What, here?
Yeah, here. You can get this kid. Of course, here. Come on, teach us something.
Oh, all right. Farmer Hank has 7 turkeys. Then he buys 6 more. How many turkeys does Farmer Hank now have?
Is one of the turkeys pregnant?
One of my kids asked the same thing.
Because it's a good question, and it shows that they're using critical thinking.
It's irrelevant.
No, it might be silly to you, but to them, it might be an important question that if they don't get it answered, they can't focus.
And diversions are an important part of learning. Otherwise, they're just memorizing.
Memorization is how I learn all the state's capitals. Juneau, Salem, Madison. I keep going.
In my class, we do silly voice time to, break up the day.
And it makes learning more fun, too.
Okay. Follow my lead. Here we go.
What's happening?
Oh, come on now, son. Moving those hips a little, it is not going to kill you. Now, let's do this math problem again. Oh, what's the turkey farmer's name?
Hank?
Yes. All right. Hank has 2 turkeys. He gets 2 more. How many turkeys? Hank has 2 turkeys. He gets 2 more. How many turkeys?
He has 4.
Or 6 if one of the turkeys is pregnant with twins. See? Who told you learning can't be fun?
You have the essentials. I'm not sure what the research says about funny voices and singing. Not that that's not engaging. You don't need to revert to that. You've got the practices to support you. Abbott Elementary, ABC, mockumentary. Isn't that a great word? I'm sorry. A real documentary in elementary school would be fabulous, but we have all those privacy laws. So, all right, you're going to go off for a quick stretch break. Please come back. Before you head out, we're going to give you 10 full minutes. Take good advantage, but before you head out, find someone not at your table, give them a quick high five on your way out to a break. What current practice in your organization around practice number 5, systems of support, can you really celebrate? So, on your way out, fist bumps, high five, take a break, be back in 10. 11:02. So we've got about 25 minutes left. Don't forget, we're going to end the morning with the folks that are facilitating breakout sessions, a little blurb from them about what the content of their sessions, so we want to make sure we get a chance to do that before you head off to lunch. You recall I talked about the interconnectedness and interrelationship between the organizational practice to create a true system. And I said we leveraged 1 and 4, building leadership teams with expertise and professional learning. Because I define leadership broadly, I was not the expert. I facilitated the learning of a lot of others. The quote that Rusty gave you this morning from Intentional Interruptions, from that book is my favorite quote about learning. Learning is the permanent change in thinking or behavior. Learning is a permanent change in thinking or behavior. That's what I was going for. We were done with the pity of the students living in poverty. We needed to learn about how to shift our practice so we could do things differently for our students. So we did that in concert. The leadership team designed, remember when I first started, we had 3 early release Wednesdays a month. 3, 2 hours each, 6 hours of professional learning every month. And I had one job. My job was to be the gatekeeper. I committed to my leadership team. I committed to my staff. I will not allow the district or the ISD to come in and sabotage our PD. Now, every once in a while that happened, but I tried really hard. They were just so wanting a consistency and continuity in our professional learning. So we leveraged 1 and 4 to get into how to create these systems of support, academically and behaviorally, for our students. So we did learning during the year. Think about all that rich, rigorous learning and professional learning structure by design. But I also sent summer learning home. Creatively insubordinate. I always couched it with, this is not mandated. At your leisure, spend some time learning. Here are some pieces. If I could have the slides back up. Here are some pieces that you might want to dig into. Now, this is 6 summers worth. Okay, so mind you, this isn't one summer. After I left, one of my, was my special ed teacher, then my kindergarten teacher, then an interventionist. Highly trained teachers working with the most at-risk kids. She sent me a picture of that when she cleaned out after I left. She's like, this is all our summer learning for 6 summers. So I invested in them and promoted their learning even in the off time. Paraeducators, recess supervisors, support staff, they got a different mailing. They got reading, they got learning, pared down. You know, I had to be thoughtful about their positions, what they could commit. Again, always couched in, not a mandate, a highly suggested body of work. And I even had, my longtime special ed teacher retired right before I left. And I still see her. I had her son in my very first 6th grade class as a classroom teacher. And she said, my kids used to make so much fun of me because you would send an email and say that the mailing was coming, and I would run to the mail. She was like 70. And she would run to the mailbox to see if her packet of reading came in the mail, right? So they started to look forward to it. And it started to re-professionalize what we were doing with professional learning. We very much followed a lot of the learning systems, professional learning systems that Allison talked about yesterday. We were really thoughtful about our roles in professional learning. We were really thoughtful about the design, right? So we didn't have staff meetings. We redesigned those events to be learning opportunities. We had routines, protocols, agendas, structures in place, and we had tools which were, again, our data, our protocols, an article of research that we might pair with our text-based protocol. So we did a lot of these, and we also had these things sprinkled throughout here. Trusting relationships, right? I needed my staff to feel vulnerable and courageous to move forward in an area they didn't feel competent in. And nobody shamed them for that. Remember, I was humanizing the experience for all of us, or trying. We had reflective dialogue. That's what our routines and tools provided us. We had worked on those shared norms and values. Everything we did was collaborative. Everything. Every professional learning opportunity was, by design, collaborative. And not just within grade level, across grade level at times as well. And we always had a collective focus on learning. Our learning, the learning of children, in academic and non-academic spaces. So I just wanted to share with you, again, back to 1 and 4, how can it support these other essential practices? So let's go to chapter 2 in our story. A story, not the story, not your story, a story of a school. So in chapter 2, we're going to talk about essential number 6, the individual needs. An organizational system assesses and responds to individual needs that impact learning and development. We're struggling with this right now. We have a lot of students displaying a lot of behaviors and a lot of other concerning things that are barriers to their learning, and we have to unpack that. You can't just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it sticks. Let's talk about number 6.
Any potential learning, physical, visual, regulatory, mental health, and social emotional needs that require specific conditions and supports are identified.
We had a mental health screener before there were mental health screeners. Someone from Community Mental Health helped us develop that, helped train a handful of people. So we had a mental health screener. We had a truancy. I don't want to call it a program because it was support. It wasn't an in and out. It was comprehensive. It was with families as well as students and staff to help with truancy. Tardies, absences. I gave a lot of alarm clocks away to children who were empowered to get to school. We had vision and hearing screening at K Roundup. A huge barrier for some of our kindergartners we found is that they had all that paperwork in. We require a lot. And a lot of them didn't come with their screening. So we had kids starting a week late in kindergarten because they hadn't gotten to the health department or the doctor to get a screening for vision and hearing. And by law, we couldn't let them into school. So we started to have folks from community mental, or from our health department come into our kindergarten roundup and get the screening done right there in the spring. Mobile dentists, we instituted a mobile dentist. Some of you have those things as well. We did staff changes. We had a guidance counselor, lovely, lovely woman named Eunice Villatoro. But she was a traditional guidance counselor. And when she retired, I advocated to get a trained school social worker in her place, right? And that was really helpful for students that had needs that were labeled gen ed, not special ed. And so I was able to hire a school social worker in her place. And then we really intentionally, deliberately blurred the lines of special ed and gen ed. I hope you have your special ed folks with you here today, but if you don't, tell them it's okay. Just be creatively insubordinate. We had gen ed kids join special ed groups. We had special ed kids join. Now, remember, my one interventionist was special education certified, so we were blurring the lines. We weren't breaking any laws. And that was really important. Remember the bird sanctuary? This is what they wanted, right? They wanted to do this, and we leaned into it. But by doing that, we were able to try to potentially identify what were those barriers for students to academics through non-academic needs.
Assessments, interventions, and initiatives align with family and community values, culture, and history, and attend to students' strengths, assets, and funds of knowledge.
We did home visits. One of those summer articles, just to my kindergarten staff, was an ASCD article from Ed Leadership about home visits. Slipped it in my kindergarten teachers' envelopes of summer learning. I get a call in July, can we do home visits? And I was like, yeah, what can I do to help? And they would go around, again, we had to let the union steward know that we were doing this. We were really transparent with our, our opportunities. Home visits, every kindergartner got a home visit. Then we decided to scale that up, 1st through 4th grade. We canvassed the neighborhoods. We were a neighborhood school. So we came voluntarily, sent a postcard. We're going to stop and visit you to welcome you back to the new school year. Between this hour and this hour on this day, we hope to see you. Gave them a heads up because this is not comfortable for some families. We wanted to honor that. We also wanted to fold them in. We had some grandparents who might have been peeking out of their 2nd floor window at us. That's fine. They didn't come to the door. It's all good. They knew we were coming. We left a welcome bag. We didn't stay long. We didn't go in. We just welcomed them back to the school year. When we switched to a balanced calendar, that was really important because we had a lot of families that, even though we had talked about it for a year before, didn't get the memo that we were starting a month earlier. So neighborhood canvassing came in really, really handy that first year of balanced calendar. Oh, so mind you, I don't even have balanced calendar listed. Talk about being creatively insubordinate. We had a school with a balanced calendar. They were our highest SES elementary school in the whole district. It is one of our traps that we perpetuate year after year after year. There is no research. It has a negative effect size, 12 weeks off in the summer, yet we do it every summer institutionally, talk about oppressing kids. So we pushed for also becoming a balanced calendar school. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of collective work. And it was a lot of trust from the families and communities back to us as a school staff. We moved those parent-teacher conferences into the first month of school. We wanted to engage parents. So again, like the kindergartners, 4 times they could have seen their teacher before they entered kindergarten. Our 1st through 4th graders, they could have seen our your teacher in your school twice. Neighborhood canvassing, back to school picnic the week before. So again, acclimating, moving those conferences to the first month of school, making those goal-setting conferences with families. We also had a team meeting norm. Our norms for PL were much different than our norms for data dialogue. If you don't have different norms, you should because the purpose is different. One of our norms in our data dialogues, in our team meetings, focus on what you can control. Trap, blame the families. Trap, blame the last year's teacher. Trap, blame the other school they came from. Trap, trap, trap. Focus on what you can control. What's in your sphere of influence? Stop there. And we had a norminator, right, who had the liberty to call time out, if somebody was not following that norm. Because it really quickly could derail us and also not focus on assets that we had worked so hard to prioritize.
Every adult has access to research-supported strategies and tools to support culturally responsive whole child development for each child, including, for example, strategies for improving socio-emotional skills, such as emotional understanding, and techniques for helping children develop executive function skills, such as planning.
As I mentioned, we first started with the work of Ruby Payne. It's what was out there. It's just all that was out there. And then we moved to the work of Eric Jensen. I was just talking to someone at break. If I had to do it all over again, we might start with Eric Jensen. It's really consumable, right? Especially for practitioners. But I would move to the work of Horacio Sanchez, the poverty problem, because he gets even deeper into that neuroscience of the brain. And I wanted my teachers to know that. They were used to including students with cognitive impairments into their space where the gray matter interferes with the learning for those children, but is pliable. So we wanted to transfer that to our students living in poverty. So we did that. There was a section in his text about classroom level factors and school level factors. We focused on school level factors with support staff. Every staff read this book. That was summer reading in and of itself, one summer. And support staff, they were just assigned the school-wide factors, things like relationships. Absolutely wanted them investing in that, wanted to empower them to create those. And then we had evidence-based lessons. A lot of you do that, right? You have classroom-level lessons around social and emotional learning, and then a repeat of those lessons in small groups of children who were identified as needing more to increase those executive functioning skills. That's probably something that you're used to seeing, something similar. I think the trick is not siloing it and isolating it so much that it's only done during a certain block of time, right? It should be constant, and it should infuse everything that you're doing.
Children receive coordinated, intensive supports and services that include continued collaboration among teachers, interventionists, family, and others whose expertise is relevant. Special education teacher, school psychologist, school nurse, social worker.
Breakfast in the classroom. Our bus that came and brought students from one of our low-income neighborhoods got to school late every day. Those were the children that needed to eat breakfast the most. Breakfast was all the way down this long addition to the building in the cafeteria. They would sit in the cafeteria, they would eat their breakfast, they would miss somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes of the beginning of the day every day. Well, that didn't settle well. So we piloted breakfast in the classroom with some willing teachers, right? They decided it wasn't awful. We had a great system, worked with food service, talk about systems level work with food service and our food director. And by the end of the year, we had such good feedback. That's when I came in and said, we're going to all do this. And we had the right systems. We worked out the kinks. We're going to make this work. So every child had access to breakfast in the classroom. It was an adjustment, yes, but it's what we needed to do as adults to change what we were doing to serve the students. We had check-in, check-out. A lot of you have that with students, where they check in at the beginning of the day with a trusted adult. They check out, right? So there's a constant level of feedback, self-evaluation, setting yourself up for the next day. We did weekend backpack meals. Our students were eating breakfast and lunch with us for free, but they had no food. I knew they had food. They lacked food they were food insecure on the weekends. So we worked with the local food bank to start, and this little lady ran out to Aldi to buy the fresh fruits and vegetables every week, and then she had volunteers that would literally put them in plastic bags, and then we very discreetly gave those out, right? It grew, and we actually got funding for some weekend food backpack meals, but we started very grassroots with a local food bank. We had behavior plans. We had behavior plans for kids not with IEPs. Lots of kids need more structure and need more adults with a common understanding of what we can do to support that child. So we didn't let special ed be a barrier to any student that needed to have a behavior plan. And we supported, we heavily supported with those staff that had the expertise.
All adults intentionally work to identify systems and conditions that may hinder or support learning for each child. They intentionally work to modify learning environments to recognize and respond to children's individual, developmental, and cultural needs. They intentionally work to foster collaborative relationships with professional colleagues and children's families.
And the and comes next. So again, beginning of this idea of SWIS, which was our way to monitor behavior reports, right? It was new at the time, so we were on the brink of AIMSweb and SWIS. But man, when we jumped in, we used it hardcore, right? We looked at where were our most critical behaviors happening, where, what time of the day, what were we going to do to shift our structures and practices to address that. One of the examples, I don't know who does this, but apparently it was a trap. Let's send 2 grade levels of children, 150 kids, out to the playground with 2 adults, because that sounds safe. So we restructured. We had Sycamore time for alternate recess. Much like our flooding for academics, we flooded that afternoon recess space, and we grouped students. Every week was a new rotation. Teachers could be very selective. Like, this child really needs that smaller, active, gross motor space, like the gym, versus outside, because their regulation was not in place outside, but was more contained inside, right, in that smaller support. We used the library. We used the computer lab. We used a classroom, right, all hands on deck to have alternate recess. So no more 150 kids out there with 2 adults. Not safe, we were really setting kids up to not be successful in that non-academic space. Busing, we did lessons on the bus, right? I engaged the bus drivers, we created lessons, we co-taught them, I rode the bus, right? So we had for the bus for some of our kids is a really hard time starting out the day and a really hard time ending the day. Recess supervisors. I empowered recess supervisors to write their own lessons in what the expectations were outside and to teach them. And we looked at data. I couldn't pay them extra. I didn't have the funds, but I'd buy them pizza once a month, right? And they'd stay after lunch recess. And with our social worker, we would look at the data and we would make accommodations. What do we need to do differently now? Okay, so empower the support staff. They are part of your team and part of your system.
Assess whether school-wide patterns in learning and or behavior warrant adopting strategies or programs, and if so, implement ones that are caring, student-centered, and equity-orientated that have been shown to positively impact both academic and social-emotional learning.
We use culturally responsive PBIS. Be cautious, right? A lot of the first models of PBIS did not take into consideration the cultures, the backgrounds, the lived experiences of your students. So please just be thoughtful about who your student population is and adapt those expectations. We really worked hard on the 5-to-1 ratio, 5 positive to 1 negative, right? That's not new to us in our work around creating systems of support with behavior. Not easy to do. Lots of reminders for the adults, right? But we really worked hard on it. We had our little cheesy superstar tickets that was controversial with my curriculum director at the time. And I said, it's not for the kids. Although a lot of them like it, some of them don't care. It's for the adults. Like, if you're not physically pairing one of those little pieces of paper with feedback about what's appropriate at that time, you're not getting your 5-to-1 ratio in. So we did things like challenge, like, here's a stack of 25. I want you to write the same kid's name on all 25. The next week you come back and you report out, how was your week ensuring you got a 5-to-1 ratio with that particular child that needed it. Things like, again, TRAP. We've always done this really great assignment in gym, which we weren't called gym, we were called kinetics, because we did not teach gym, we taught in a gym. Kids in nutrition, exercising to increase cardio stamina, kinetics. And in October, we're going to send home an I'm being a little cheeky. We're going to send home an Eat Orange assignment. And so you need to bring back this Eat Orange assignment and write on the calendar every time you tried a new orange fruit or vegetable. How accessible were fruits and vegetables to my students who are living in poverty? Not as accessible as some of my other students. And then repercussions if you didn't bring it back, or repercussions if you didn't try enough. So I flipped the script and I said, I honor what you're trying to do, get kids to be healthier, help them with healthier habits. Let us take that on. Worked with the food service supervisor again. We had a color week celebration. And every day of that week, we wore the color of the day. We tried fruits and vegetables, and not just kids on free and reduced lunch. We had plates of fruits and vegetables that we had volunteers going and asking kids if they wanted to try. New colored by the day fruits and vegetables all week long. They got a punch card if they tried, and then we gave away fruit and vegetable baskets at the end of the week, right? Let me take that on. I honor what you're doing, classroom teacher. Let me take that on as a system and make it work for our kids. Okay, back to in real research. Let's give it up for my wizards in the back who are reading. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Melissa. So let me take you again. If you want your foundation to be research and you want to delve in, don't be afraid of the footnotes. Don't be afraid of the footnotes. So here's a piece by Rains and colleagues around universal screening for behavioral and emotional risks. We honor honor teacher observation, teacher credibility, teacher agency, absolutely. But don't burden the teacher to come by themselves with an anecdotal concern about a child's behavior. Give them the tools, give them the supports from other experts in order for us to match what the child needs with what the teacher and what the system can do to support. So in this body of research, they open up in this particular article about the implications of a special ed label of behavioral or emotional disorders. Heavy, heavy label. Any label is heavy. I don't love labels. Teacher nomination alone, they found in their review of the literature, was that it could cause or drive disproportionality. And in this particular article, it's disproportionality of African American children being labeled with behavioral or emotional concerns more often than non-African American students. Office discipline referrals can reflect bias. Functional behavior assessments can elicit a more desired outcome than just the number of office discipline referrals. Then they talked about universal screening as a proactive and preventative tool to use in your process of supporting where students get support and what supports they might give. And they give you a quick definition of what a universal screener is. They introduce you in this particular article to two specific tools that are used as screeners. The SSBD, which is multi-tiered from tier 1 up to tier 3, and then the BASC-2. You may have heard of these. Maybe you haven't. Maybe it's something that's worthwhile to checking out. But the idea is you take the burden off just the classroom teacher to make that recommendation for support. So this just gives you a few bullets on what is encompassed in these particular universal screeners. Moral of the story is that you just have to have data to go with the anecdotal observations. Honor those, but don't let a teacher hang out on just those. It's not enough. They also mentioned student self-reports. So what they found in their research is that student self-reports yield that self-perception, which is more helpful to identify the internal concerns, whereas the other, especially the SSBD, that identified like these external concerns, but less about the internalized ones, internalized symptoms, and that overall self-student reports are predictive of achievement and behavioral concerns. So again, dig into the research if that is your hook and that's your foundation. I just wanted to introduce those, another body of research to support some of what we were actualizing in our school. Just a couple of other, if appropriate, right, it removes that burden of student identification from just individual educators, and it encourages that data-driven, data-informed process. Back to our values. Here is a quick excerpt of like a dream school from Building Equity, which is a Fisher Fry and colleagues publication out of ASCD. Just want you to take a look at this. Imagine if a school did these things. You can see lots of ties back into the school-wide, center-wide values, the values of our school that I'm sharing our story of today. We weren't perfect. We made mistakes. I made lots of mistakes. If I had it all to do over again, I've learned so much since then. But we were striving for this. I hope we created it for more students than when I first got there. So we're not going to do a high five partner because we're short on time. Here's our epilogue. The epilogue is these school-wide practices truly are a conduit to more equitable and accessible opportunities for our students. If you haven't seen this rendition of what equity means. I really like it. There's a couple different, there's several out there. But I appreciate this, and what this is about is coming up with a common understanding of what equity and equality and accessibility mean to your organization. That's part of the values conversation. Nothing can take the place of that common understanding and that common expectation. I really appreciate the way that the Great Lakes Equity Center talks about equity, right? It's this interplay of policies, practices, interactions, and resources. It's not a thing. You don't just do it once a week. We don't put it on the calendar. We have a tendency to verb everything in education, don't we? We do PLCs because it's on the calendar. I also love Foundation for Tacoma Students. Equity is an approach. Equity recognizes that we do not all start from the same place because of advantages and barriers exist. Equity is a process. By acknowledgement, these varied starting places, the Foundation for Tacoma Students seeks to correct the imbalance for the most marginalized and minoritized populations. My kids didn't ask to be in poverty. We were going for equity. I didn't have the language back then, y'all. I have it now. I didn't have but that's what we were really doing in spirit, is trying to create equitable opportunities. But the conclusion of the story, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't care what systems you have in place. I don't care what structures you create. If you don't go back and work on norms, vision, mission, shared values, however you do it, that's the culture piece that 1 in 4 can help you promote. You gotta work on culture, or all those systems are just gonna dissolve away. Gotta have culture. Can we play our last video, please? Sorry, I'm over.
To this one, I want you to work together on this one because we're taking the quiz afterwards, and if you're still having... All right, guys.
So I'm asking all the teachers to take pictures of things that are important to them, and you are very important to me. You make me want to come to school every day. Take pictures of things that are important to them, and you're important to me. You're one of the reasons that I want to come to school every day. And so,
of things that we love and things that inspire us. So you are one of the reasons that I come to school every day.
I chose you because you mean a lot to me and you're really important to me. So I wanted to take your picture. Okay?
Take a photo of a student that really inspires us to be a better teacher.
Okay.
I chose you because you mean an awful lot to me, and I wanted you to know that. So I was wondering if it was okay if I could take your picture. All right? Okay, that's fine. It's because I'm short. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so for this project, I've been asked to take pictures of students that are important to me. And even though you're sassy, and we're both sassy with each other, you're one of the reasons that I love to come to school. So they asked us to pick students at Deja that are important to us. And I just wanted to let you know that you're one of the reasons that I love to come to work and that you're really special to me. And I'm proud of everything that you've done. And so I wanted to take your picture.
Okay. So let me explain to you what's going on. Hold on. All right, hold on. Let me
Why is it in my face?
Shh. Ooh, okay, this is good. All right, so let me tell you why I'm doing this. So Mr. Henry, he asked that the teachers, he asked us if we would do a project. And are you here, Mizzy?
Yes.
So the project he asked us to do was to pick a student who means a lot to us and who is really important to us and take a picture of them. And the first name who popped to my mind was Zanaya Smith.
Oh my gosh!
So I was wondering if I could take a picture of you.
Sure.
All right, here we go.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, gotta get ready?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, one. Oh, you're getting higher and higher. Oops, let me. Okay, oh. 1, 2, 3.
What? All right, so basically, Mr. Henry is having us take pictures of things that we love and things that inspire us and people who make us want to come to work every day. And seeing you grow and change and try so hard this year, you make me want to come to work. So I'm taking your picture. All right? Okay.
This is a mural in Detroit, at Eastern Market. Used to be at the bottom of my signature. I think it got deleted somehow, so it's not there anymore, but be creatively insubordinate. Ground yourselves in your values, the research from the practices, but be creatively insubordinate to nudge on those traps, because this is why we do what we do. Sorry I'm late. It was the 10-minute break, y'all. I know. It's a good one.
I'm not sure why she wanted 230 people to cry, but it worked. Thank you. What a gift, again, to have someone who knows the research but also lives the real work. So a round of applause again. A couple of things before we have a great lunch and have some great sessions this afternoon. One of the things that you all said was we needed just a quick story of what the breakouts are so we can make a more informed decision. So we're gonna have Trish or Sonia, if you could help us with getting a mic to our friends. Just a quick, like 2-sentence summary of what a breakout will be. On your agenda, I'll start from the left and work to the right, so you can kind of hear just a short story of what we're hoping to accomplish. The first up is high quality math instruction with Danielle. Danielle, can you give us a short story?
Yes. Okay, we are going to just connect work that we are embedded in every day and vision about high quality instruction, connecting that to what you see and work with every day, and it will directly connect to some evidence-based, research-based documents and resources that we have. So there will be a lot of time for you to talk and interact with table groups, and so come on out this afternoon.
Thanks. Next up, high quality literacy instruction with Michelle. Maybe raise a hand. Oh yeah, as far as we could be away. Trish has got it.
So we're covering high quality literacy instruction, really that fact that what we should do in our classroom should be based on research, and the research is so readily available to us in the essentials, so really focusing on that.
Thank you. And leveraging formative assessment to support individual needs with Ellen.
Good morning. We are going to lean into Essential 5 and really concentrate on balanced assessment systems with an emphasis on the formative assessment process that can help us really support students, each and every student, from where they're at to where they need to go. You'll have time to reflect on how the formative assessment practices intersect with the essential standards or the essential learnings for literacy and math. And then we'll end with some thinking around Essential 6 and thinking about how we systematize this and make it the work of the organization, not just individual classroom teachers.
Thank you. Equity-oriented continuous improvement with our friend Diane.
So in the equity-oriented continuous improvement, we will be digging into the 5 values and taking our conversations from yesterday and today a little deeper as we analyze and concretize those values.
Thank you. And last but not least, diverse text set, overview, stories, and panel discussion. Lisa?
Thank you, Rusty. We're going to be connecting our head, hearts, and hands in this session. You'll leave understanding the culturally and historically responsive educational framework from Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. We're going to build a sense of community in our session, and you're going to leave with Dr. Muhammad's book. You're also going to leave with the picture book, Milo Changes the World. So, whoop, you don't want to miss this session. But most importantly, you're going to learn about how Dr. Muhammad has impacted our work at MAISA, introduced us and connected to Dr. Ashlyn Curry's work, and then brought us into this diverse tech set project that we just piloted this first year, and we're going to be moving into the next phase. So you won't want to miss us.
Thank you. So we have 5 great options as we did yesterday. Each of these topics connect to practice 5 and 6. We are 15 minutes late, so we're going to do what we did yesterday, knowing it does take an hour for us to get through lunch for everyone. We'll push our start time for the breakouts 15 minutes later like we did yesterday. Sorry to facilitators, but it really helps us get everybody through our lunch, which is important. You have a great lunch today: pasta salad, wraps, there's some soup, cookies, all kinds of good things. You will have a sweet treat in your breakout, and I'm going to kick it to Susan for last words.
Just a reminder, thanks again for your attention. We'll see you back here at 12:45.